Hi, and welcome to the first AuthorAID discussion, which is part of the grant proposal and research writing online course. We're going to have a discussion about the most commonly asked questions in the discussion forums, and we have here a group of the guest facilitators for the course. Just to introduce ourselves quickly, my name is Andy Nobes, and I am Programme Officer at AuthorAID at INASP, and I am the administrator of the course.
Hi, I am Christine, and I'm a program assistant here at INASP, and I answer primarily questions on the technical queries forum on the course.
Ravi?
Hi everyone, my name is Ravi. I am the course facilitator. I'm working with our team of guest facilitators. I am an associate with INASP and a member of the AuthorAID team, and I'm based in South India.
Okay, Amir?
Hello everyone, I'm Amir of Mehman. I'm working as a lecturer in People's University of Medical and Health Sciences for Women, Nawabshah, and I'm here as a guest facilitator for the second time.
Okay, Michael?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Michael Head from the University of Southampton in the UK. I've got an epidemiology background. Infectious diseases is my main area of interest.
Great. Nayana?
Hi, I'm Nayana from Sri Lanka. I'm working in the vet school in Sri Lanka, and my current research is based on neurophysiology and electrophysiology. I got my PhD from Auburn University, USA.
Okay, thank you. I'm Richard.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Richard. I'm a full professor at the Kavli Institute for Astronomy and Astrophysics at Peking University in China. I'm also an experienced journal author, a journal editor, I should say. At the moment, I'm spending a semester away in New Zealand, so that's why it's evening for me here.
And finally, Zainab.
Hello everyone, my name is Zainab. I trained primarily as a plastic surgeon. I'm an early career researcher, and at the moment I'm doing a brief stint as a hospital administrator. This was my second time on the course, but first time facilitator. Great to be here.
Okay, thanks everyone for introducing yourselves. So on to the first question, and Christine is going to ask this.
Yeah, so we're going to start this session with a question on how do I get involved in research? So would anyone like to say something on that?
Can I start by answering that question?
Yeah.
And this is very relevant because last week, or yeah, just about a week ago, someone sent an email to the AuthorAID mailing list asking to get involved in an astrophysics project. And there are not too many of us on the mailing list, so I actually responded. Unfortunately, I responded to the mailing list rather than to the actual person, but that is a minor oversight. This person said that they really wanted to get involved in doing research and learn from experienced people. So what this person did is they actually offered their time, their input, and as a senior researcher, I thought that was a very good idea because I didn't have the time to do a certain project, but I needed, in essence, hands-on work from someone. So this is now starting as a new project.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Just briefly, I think we've got a new person who's joined. And Barley, would you like to introduce yourself? Okay. Hi, Barley, can you hear me? Okay. Okay, I'll give her a minute to join. So would anyone else like to answer the question, how do I get involved or started in research?
I would also add to what Richard said just then. Getting experience is so useful. for when you might then later apply for jobs. If you are able to volunteer even on a short basis at a university or another research institute, then getting that hands-on experience will be so beneficial in the long term.
Okay.
I could, yeah. So I think in the minds of some early career researchers in developing countries, somehow, you know, perhaps take it upon themselves that they think, how do I, where do I start? And do I have to think up a research idea? Then who do I work with? Or something like that. And but I guess as Richard mentioned, I even saw Richard's email. I thought it was really nice that he actually extended, you know, some opportunity to the person who wrote in. So it's about getting involved, I would say, to find an opportunity somewhere, you know, with a professor, with someone senior, with a university laboratory, somewhere where you get involved. So it's about small steps. It's not about dreaming, you know, of a huge idea without having any resources, but it's about starting small and getting involved and working up from there, I would say.
Can I join?
Yeah.
With my experience, when we are new to the research, it's like our baby. So we learn through experience. So first thing is we should start liking it. So to do that, you should have a good mentor, not necessarily a research mentor, but maybe a group of people whom you can share your ideas and discuss with very lay language what you are planning to do, not with the sophisticated terms, not with the sophisticated ideas of research, but in a lay language, if you can discuss so that you can get attracted to it, that would be a good start. Like, for example, if I am new to the research and if I am jumbled up with a lot of papers, a lot of material, where I will struggle finding information. So before doing that, if somebody, maybe the mentor, can guide you, how you are going to do that, how you are going to start reading it, how are you going to make sense out of what they have done. So that guidance is really important, rather than you are being left with the research title and a lot of material. So if the starting is good and pleasant, usually you will have a good and attractive end.
This is a very good suggestion, actually. In my experience, many of my undergraduate students come to me in the second half of their second year already, asking whether they can join my group just to get experience and just to see how research is being done. So they don't actually really get involved in research immediately. Sometimes they do, but at least they get a feeling for what it means. And that's, I think, exactly what you mean by mentorship.
Yes, being undergraduates, that's the best time to find facts. Whether I like the research, whether I am going to be a good, successful person in research, whether I will have the taste of it. So undergraduate period would be the best time to rehearse and to discuss and see whether that is going to be my baby in future. So I agree with Richard, yes.
Okay, great. Do we have Barley and Nicole?
Yes, I am in.
Welcome.
I had a few hiccups, I'm sorry.
That's okay, welcome. Welcome to the discussion.
I understood it was 12 my time, but it's 1.
Okay, it's good to see you. We've just started on the first question, really, which is, how do I get involved in research? Or how do I get started in research? So we're just discussing that.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on this question? Okay. And Bernie, just to say that you don't have to answer all of the questions, so feel free to jump in at any point and get involved as much as you like.
Okay.
Okay. So perhaps we'll jump onto the next one. We'll go into some of the ethics, and there are lots of discussions around research ethics and publishing ethics, and one of them was who actually qualifies to be an author of a research paper. So who'd like to start on that one?
I can take that first if you like. There are guidelines that define the role of authors and contributors and who should be on the paper, who should merely be acknowledged. Just looking them up, the guidelines, the ones certainly that I use are from the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, ICMJE. So if you Google those, then you will find them, and it has several criteria for being an author. I'll just quickly read them out. They include that an author must have made substantial contributions to the conception or design of the work, and drafted the work or revised it critically for important intellectual content, and approved the final version and agrees to be accountable for all aspects of the work. So technically, just doing the research doesn't qualify you to be an author on any subsequent papers, although the researcher typically would be an author on it. But it is important to make sure that all authors on the paper follow and agree by those guidelines there.
Okay.
Can I join?
Good response. Yeah.
My understanding about the authorship is similar to what Mike said, but I have a little bit of a changing mind. It's like this. So you should have a significant contribution to the success of the research, maybe at the time of start, maybe at the middle, maybe towards the end. It may be by doing research, it may be by brainstorming the researcher, it may be by giving a productive guidance, and also maybe the statisticians who are significantly contributing for the final product of the research. So there should be a significant contribution, I would say about maybe 75 to 80% contribution from any of the means what I discussed.
Yeah, I agree. I also agree with Mike that the ICMJE guidelines are very good, but they don't always work in practice, because sometimes within a team there is a certain sometimes there's a certain culture that that has been adopted, so that people, if they contribute at some level, but perhaps not to the entire paper, are still considered co-authors. You can agree or disagree about that, but in the end, I think it's really up to the team how this works. But I do agree that an intellectual contribution is a prerequisite to be a co-author.
Can I go? Can I go?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think I'd like us to explore the question from one of the hot topics that cropped up last year and also this year. The supervisor, the student supervisor during maybe his PhD work. And because apparently from the questions that were posted on the discussion forums, most of the supervisors are just that, supervisors. They tell you, okay, you tell them, I'm stuck at this stage, oh, go do this. I'm stuck at that stage, try this. They do not actually participate in the research. Should they qualify as authors? Okay. Looks like you didn't hear me. Right, should I repeat?
So I didn't catch the final bit of that. Was that a question at the end?
Yeah, there was a question at the end that the supervisor mainly just tells you what to do if you get stuck or he thinks you've gone wrong somewhere, should he qualify as an author?
Good question.
I guess the supervisor would typically have been substantially involved in the sort of intellectual concept and design of the work, and will no doubt be involved in drafting it critically throughout the process and at the writing paper stage as well. So most times I think it would be entirely justified for a supervisor, a PhD supervisor, to be on the paper. And again, as I think was originally said, culturally within research groups, there's generally an expectation that the supervisor would be on the papers too. But yeah, I think most of the time it's perfectly fine for the supervisor to be somewhere on the authorship list.
Yeah, I'd like to add a point there. So yeah, I think, well, ultimately it's about what is the exact situation of the person who's asking such a question. But maybe one way to look at it is, could the research have been done without a particular person, whether it's a supervisor or a colleague? So even if the supervisor is seemingly involved in reviewing, saying, no, that doesn't work, do the experiment again. All right, this is fine, do the next thing. I don't know if that, and then, well, but the idea is, as Michael said, so at the end, there is typically an involvement in sort of approving the paper or saying, all right, looks good for submission to a journal. So even that is there. So how much of it is, even supervision is doing, and if there is a supervisor involved in this way, I would think the research, they are still an essential part of the research team, because if you take them out, could the research have been done? So I would lean towards, yeah, it is appropriate to have such a supervisor as an author.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
Throughout my experiences, when I was doing my PhD, I found that it was a bit strange having my supervisor on, part as the author. And then later on, I kind of looked at it as me being the intern and he being the person, like the mentor. And without him, I wouldn't have been able to get where I was. Like, he kind of helped me shape the topic, my thinking, and how to research. So it is natural to have him as part of the co-author. So I think it is, you as the person who actually wrote as the primary author and have him as a secondary author, it makes sense.
Okay, great. We've just got someone else joining the call. So we've got Eamon. Perhaps this would be a good point for both Eamon and Bonnie to introduce themselves. Eamon, can you hear us? Eamon?
Yeah, although I have problems with the internet here.
Okay.
Hi. I'm Amon Shoko, working with the Tanzania Fisheries Research Institute. I've been involved in AuthorAID initiative since 2011. We have been conducting and embedding activities in our institution. I'm happy to be with you on air.
Okay, welcome.
I think this is my turn.
Sorry?
Thank you.
And Bonnie, would you like to give us an introduction to yourself?
Yes. So my name is Bonnie. I'm from Tanzania. I have extensive experience in both the academic and the government and the private sector, so I've kind of mixed it all up. My recent involvement was with the Ministry of Education, with the Management Information Systems. I just currently started my own NGO startup, where I deal with girls and women and to motivating them to get involved with science and technology and mentoring them, workshops and what have you. So that is my project, my current project at the moment.
Great. So we're just just having a discussion around authorship and who qualifies to be an author on a research paper. Were there any other opinions on this before we move to the next question? Okay.
Seems like we're ready to move on. So the next question will be about grant proposals. So what tips or advice do you have for writing a grant proposal?
Who wants to go first?
I have a very quick point. Read the instructions. Yeah, given by the
Read the
funding.
instruction.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think alongside the read the instructions bit, just a slight anecdote. I was once a co-applicant on a very small grant application where one of the fields had a maximum of 700 words, and our whole grant application was thrown out because that field had 702 words in it. Which seemed a little bit too pedantic to me, but there you go, that was the guideline, and I think they were looking for any excuse to throw out as many as possible. So ours got kicked out. It was only small and not that important, but obviously that was quite frustrating. But it is an example, yes, read the guidelines to the most minute detail. It is important.
But actually that raises an important issue. They were looking for anything to throw out a proposal. That probably means that they got quite a few proposals. And that means in turn that the reviewers have to read many proposals in a short period of time. So grab their attention immediately, start with the most important aspect of your proposal and just draw them in. That's very important. Rather than starting, big and going into the funnel as you do for research papers, start with the main point in your proposal.
And I would also suggest that you should try as much as possible to go over and over your proposal before you submit. Because sometimes there are few problems that you won't pick up until you have time, then you go over it. And also ask someone who's good for you. You might be able to pick up a few problems here and there before your final submission.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lena. You might need to speak slightly louder because I'm struggling to hear you.
Okay. I was suggesting that you should go over your proposal before you submit. Tend to rest. We tend to pick a few problems, sometimes even grammatical errors that you didn't pick when you were writing initially. And also have someone who's written a grant proposal before to go over it for you before you submit.
Okay. Good advice.
Anyone else?
Keep it concise. Don't go overboard on your budget, but be realistic.
Okay, so whilst we were talking about grants, perhaps we'll ask another question on this topic. So another question that we saw that was asked on the discussion list, on the discussion groups was, can I apply for a research grant as in an individual or team capacity without institutional affiliation?
Well, some funders will not allow it. I think almost always it's going to look much better if you are part of a respected research institution. You have the infrastructure and expertise around you that might help convince the funder that you would be capable of doing the work. If it was just you by yourself or a small external team, unless you already have a track record in delivering not as part of an institution, then it might be very, very tricky to get funds. Although local contexts may vary, but I think as a general rule, try and be part of a research institution.
That's me. I think at present, grant proposals which are having a multidisciplinary approach are having a better chance of getting funded. One is because of the solidarity of the group, and also the other thing is the strong input from different aspects for the same research. Therefore, the outcome is kind of assured. And also, rather than having an individual person submitting a proposal, if there's a good group submitting the proposal, it shows that there's high chance the funding agency, the funder, will get what they want, right? I think there's a reason for funding agencies to fund for a better outcome. So if there's a group rather than one person, I think by writing the grant proposal as a team, it is indicated.
Okay.
Yeah. Another question that came up on the discussion list in relation to grant proposals was, can I submit the same proposal to 2 different funders?
Was that question at the same time?
It doesn't actually say. Let's see. Will the answers be different?
Yes, of course, yes.
Yes, I think it's at the same time.
Well, many funders actually ask you to disclose whether or not the same research is under consideration by another funder. So you will have to be honest about that, and I think that precludes you from submitting it to two different funders at the same time. I think it's also unethical.
It is unethical.
Yeah. Okay.
And I guess some of these questions are maybe answered in the instructions, but I guess the point is if it's not answered in the funder's instructions, then it's best to assume that you can't use the same proposal at the same time for another funder.
Okay.
Another. Something to say?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. What if the amount voted for a particular fund will not be enough to, and then you're applying for 2 grants at the same time and you're disclosing? Would that still be unethical?
I missed the first part of that question, that answer.
My question is if the cap on a particular grant that you're applying for will not cover what you require for your research, and then you apply for 2 different grants at the same time, but then you state in each application that you've applied for this and then you're also applying for this, would that still be unethical?
I have seen this happen in reality. It's very difficult to get funding from either of the 2 funders, because they will want to know that that if they are going to fund you, they want to know for sure that the other funder is also going to fund you. Otherwise, the grant will not be very useful. All right. So this is a very, I don't think it's unethical if you disclose it this way and ask for part of the funding, but I think the chances of getting the funding are very low.
Okay, thank you for that. Another grant related question that Ravi spotted was this question. I'm preparing a budget, and how am I going to make justification of the amounts that, for example, will be used to pay the research team? So what was
the amounts included in the budget?
Yeah, actually, the simpler way of asking it was, what's the best way to justify the amounts in my proposal's budget?
Well, this is one reason why it's good to have an institution behind you rather than working by yourself. The university, for example, will have a finance department, cost out salaries, and provide advice on guidance on how much equipment or travel or so on will cost. So that's only one very good reason to be at a university or research institute. It may well be that funders might want to see quotes. So if you're looking at travel, you might need to sort of take examples of how much flights will cost, or if you're going to run an event, how much the catering will cost and that sort of thing. So providing evidence of the figures that you put in the application may well be required and or might be useful as well.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you. Actually, I think we should go to that one.
Right. So our next question is around plagiarism, and how do you avoid plagiarism and self-plagiarism as well?
Let me go first on that one.
Sure.
My first suggestion will be you need to know what plagiarism is first, and that way you're not likely to violate. Recently, one of my colleagues sent me a proposal he's writing for his dissertation, and he had sent it to a colleague who had run a plagiarism check on it, and came back with about 46% similarity index. And when I went through it, I realized that even though he had cited appropriately, he was using a lot of direct quotes. For example, WHO said this, and then he will quote word for word. So I advised him, I think it would be nice if you paraphrased a lot of your quotes and then you cite appropriately. So in this case, there was really no plagiarism because he had cited properly, but he was lifting word for word. So one, it's important that you paraphrase, you do not copy and paste, you cite properly, and
hello, Andy. Hello, Andy.
Hi, Eukaria. Hi, can you hear me? Okay. Sorry about that. Sorry, Zainab. Do you want to finish what you're saying?
Yes, and also make sure that before you submit your work, make sure you've checked, you've run.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me? Your network is crazy down here. Hey.
Let's just see if we can fix Eukaria's problems. Hi, can you hear us? Okay. Let's mute for the moment, because it'd be good if we could hear Zainab's full summary of what she's just said, because it was a really good response.
Okay. So I can go on now?
Yeah, sorry, could you summarize again, because that was really good.
First rule for me is you must know what constitutes plagiarism. When you know the rules, you're not likely to go against them. Then two, before your final submission, you must cite appropriately, very important. And before your final submission, be sure to run it through a plagiarism checker. That will help a lot.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, that was good.
I would like to add that it helps when you plan your paper. It helps when you understand what exactly you want to write, then you're not influenced by material from outside. You should know where and when you need support from literature review, where you need to inject some idea to help structure your logic, rather than just pick up different quotes or material from literature and put that in your paper. Then in that case, you're actually just going with the wind. So if you plan your paper, you know what you want to say, you know exactly at what point you need to support your paper with evidence, with literature review, then you're less likely to be caught up with the plagiarism. And when you do need to plagiarize, then you cite. And where possible, then you paraphrase. But if it's not your idea, then you actually still cite the person, but I think these areas will actually help reduce plagiarism.
Great.
I have a I have a question from what she's just said, because what she's described now will technically mean that when you're doing a review article, then you're plagiarizing. At least that's the interpretation I'm likely to get if I'm listening to what you said. So could you like rephrase your answer a bit? Sorry.
Can you repeat that? I didn't catch it properly.
Okay. I'm saying that your submission will kind of say that a review article is like plagiarism, because essentially what a review article is what are the experts saying about this particular topic. So essentially what you're doing is, this expert said this expert said that. So there are conditions where you'll have to, it's essentially talking about other people's ideas and bringing them together for like a summary for researchers to go through.
Okay, yeah, you're right. In one way, you're right. But on the other hand, what I'm trying to explain is that when you plan out your work, when you actually write it out in advance, and you know exactly what to look for in literature review and what you need to inject into your work, you're less likely to copy, wholesome, and paste. You're likely to take out the points that you need and then support that with your own writing and your own logic, because you're trying to form a logic. In that case, you'll do less copy and paste as opposed to, yeah, but otherwise, when you read literature review, I mean, the whole point is to actually get other people's work. But you should also come in from a point of view of, you know exactly what you need from outside, you know what you're planning to write, and then copy and paste.
Thank you.
I just like to add that so plagiarism it's at the level of text, which is somehow, there seems to be often a focus on the text level plagiarism, which is about, say, copy and pasting words, or paraphrasing it but not giving a citation, or both, something. But then there is a kind of a more sinister form of plagiarism, which is plagiarism at the level of ideas, where it could be done there could be some paraphrasing, but the citation could be omitted, perhaps deliberately, or something like that. So so plagiarism can happen both at the level of text and at the level of ideas. The text level is easier to catch with software, or even with Google. Some software packages are not free, but even Google, if you just copy and paste, sometimes you come across it. So that's text level. But it's also good to be aware that it can happen at even a very good writer can kind of plagiarize at the level of ideas, because they know how to write. Yeah, so that's what I like to add.
Okay, any other thoughts on plagiarism or self-plagiarism?
Actually, this is something which I followed when I was a research student. The first advice I got from my supervisor was, this was not about plagiarism. The one best way to avoid plagiarism is read an article, understand what they want to say, and then write in another book in your own words what he tries to express. And underneath the sentence, what you wrote in your own words, write from where you cited that work and what journal. So later, if you want to incorporate that into your own writing, so rather than going and copying and pasting from the original work, so you have your own build-up, your store, and so that you can easily incorporate it into your writing. So first skim scan, then understand, and write it in your own words in a booklet. So that's what I followed. But I know when we are at the last minute, it's difficult. But when we are starting research students, we have plenty of time to organize our work, to get attracted into the area what we are researching. So that's the best time. You start reading and then understand and then write it in your own words in another place.
Okay. Good advice. It seems that a lot of the issues with plagiarism stem from a misunderstanding of how to cite correctly, and I think that's something that's come up in a few of the responses. So understand proper citation practices and understand what plagiarism actually is. Okay, so we'll move on then from plagiarism if everyone's okay with that. And Christine, would you like to?
Yeah. So our next question is on access to literature. So how do I get access to research literature that is behind a paywall?
Well, one way is to be a member of an institution again, because sometimes they will have journal access. Most universities will have access to at least some journals, although the number of journals they have access to will vary. When I was at UCL, the journal access was brilliant. Southampton, it's still pretty good, but not quite as good as UCL. I mean, one other little tool that I use that I'm assured is perfectly legal and fine by the librarians here at Southampton. I use Chrome as a browser, and there's a little plugin called Unpaywall, which if you add it to your browser, and then you're looking at a paper online, it comes up with a little sort of green circle at the side of the screen. And you can click on that circle, and it'll take you to wherever there's a free and open version of that paper. I noticed a few people nodding, particularly Andy and Christine there. So I mean, I found it quite useful on a few occasions. So yeah, one tip would be to look up Unpaywall. And I think there are other sort of variations on the theme as well.
Yeah, that's a good tip. It's quite a new tool that's come out, and it's worth looking into. And I'll put the link up on the screen when this video is finished.
Another option is to go for a preprint service. There are more and more papers that are submitted to as preprints to preprint service like bioRxiv or arXiv. Those tend to be the author versions of either submitted or recently accepted papers before they've gone through the proofing, but all of the information will be in that paper, although the formatting might be slightly different from the final published version.
Actually, getting the papers is the biggest barrier for researchers in developing countries. But if it is from a developed country, interlibrary loans and university websites are good enough to get the good paper. But when you are from a developing country, it's the biggest barrier. So in that case, I have tried the ResearchGate website.
Yeah.
Sometimes that works.
I do the same.
And yeah, sometimes writing to the corresponding author will work.
Yeah.
And the easiest and fastest method would be writing to a friend in overseas who has access to journal articles.
I do all the above. All the above. It's quite difficult from a developing country to get access to papers.
Actually,
so recently, talk to somebody who's out there who has access, and they can access and email you. So
I have a sneaky way of that I just discovered. I'm currently trying to do a review article, and what I did was to reach to two colleagues, one in the US, another in the one in the US, one in the UK, and I invited them to join the paper, and they're happy to join. And voila, we have almost all the papers we have.
Papers under paywall can also be accessed using Google Scholar. There's an option, all versions, and in all versions one may find a PDF available of the article. Strategy that can be tried.
And you could also search the website of the institution of the author as well. Certainly here at Southampton, we are required to upload the accepted version of the manuscript, not necessarily the final published version, but the accepted version. So again, similarly there, it's a bit like a preprint server, I guess, in a way, in that there will be a sort of nearly final version of the paper available openly. So if you know where the author is based, then you could search that website for some version or other of the paper too.
Mm-hmm. And there's a website which combines all this data from the institutional repositories into one place. It's called Open Door. That's Open DOAR, and it searches a database of these repositories of different institutions. That might also be a good method of searching. Okay, I think we covered most of the good tips there, unless we've missed any, Ravi.
No, that's good. Yeah,
okay. To add. There's usually a way of finding the papers out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to another hot topic. This one's about predatory journals, and I know that Amir might have some things to say about this. So the question is, how do you identify a predatory journal? And what do you do if you discover that you've published in a predatory journal?
Well, the first step I go for when looking for a journal is to explore. I normally explore the website of the journal. Everyone who is looking for a journal should start with exploring the website of the journal, and there are some features typical of predatory journals. If they are available on the website of the journal, they should avoid or refrain from that journal. For instance, the journal mentions fake metrics like global impact factor, source, generalized impact factor. It mentions fake indexation services, and its scope is overwhelmingly broad. Its duration of publication is short and ultra short. It has some article processing charges that are different from the open access, of course. So these are some features that can help authors to decide on legitimacy of a journal and avoid predatory journals. And coming to the second part of your question, if someone has published in a predatory journal, that published paper cannot be submitted to another journal that is legitimate one. First of all, he or she should get it retracted or taken off from the website of the predatory journal, and then try to submit it to a legitimate journal. And he or she should also disclose it with the editor that submitted and published in a predatory journal and was retracted later on, so that there is no ambiguity left, because transparency research is the key.
Yes. Okay, good ideas. And yes, it's important to look at the website of the journal and just look for some of those things, and look for things that you wouldn't find on a normal credible journal. Anybody else got any tips for spotting these predatory?
Usually they're all over the place. They have a gazillion number of interest areas. They cover from arts to science to, that should be like a red flag right there.
Yeah. Yeah, so definitely the scope of the journal is usually huge.
Yeah.
I think the trickier issue is well, there is a lot of advice out there on how to identify predatory journal. There's Think, Check, Submit, and we are talking about this, but then that's sort of preemptive thing. But I guess the more difficult thing is, what if someone has inadvertently published in a predatory journal, and then they come to know that, okay, so that's actually a bad journal. So what now? And I think often the editors may not withdraw. So that would be the first thing, as Amir mentioned, to try to withdraw your paper from that journal. But what if there is no response from the journal? It's up on their website. That can happen. So what does one do then? I don't have any answers as such, so it's just a question for discussion here. Any thoughts?
I think also with some of the predatory journals, they have quite well, let's call it strict terms on copyright as well. Whereas with most papers, you're sort of free to use it as you wish. Predatory journals, again, one reason why they might not be forthcoming about retracting your paper. Well, in fact, you can't do anything about it because they then own the copyright. It's entirely up to them as to what they do with it. So it could get quite tricky and a little bit unpleasant if you have inadvertently published in a journal. So yeah, like Ravi, I've literally no idea what you do about it in that situation. So I don't know if anyone else has any good ideas.
Well, I think with most open access journals, and that's what predatory journals are pretending to be, is an open access journal. What should normally happen in open access is that the author retains the copyright. And in a lot of these cases, the journal is keeping the copyright. And if the author has not signed a copyright transfer form, then the journal has no rights to own the copyright of that article, and in fact they have no right to publish without the explicit permission of the author. So I think it can really depend on what the author has signed and what they've actually said. If they've signed their copyright over, then they might be in a sticky situation. But if they haven't signed over their copyright, then or if they have signed a Creative Commons license, then they may well have a right to be able to withdraw very easily and publish their article elsewhere, I think.
I think, yeah, it's one thing to have the right, but to exercise that right is, so the author is not going to be able to take the journal editor to copyright court or something. You know, it's really impractical, especially in a developing country. So even, I think a lot of predatory journals do, in fact, say Creative Commons license and all that, but it's on their website. And even if, you know, it's legally, as per the terms of the license, you have a right to withdraw it. But, you know, it doesn't happen, then you can't be, so you're looking at something with legal system. But yeah, it doesn't, yeah, it's all virtual, you know, this kind of work. I think, well, it's not, I would say, yeah, it is a very tricky issue. But increasingly, I think yeah, there's more awareness, even at the institutional level, at different institutions, about predatory journals. So I think Amir mentioned that it's transparency, something about being transparent. So I think that would be the way to go, to just be transparent, to perhaps add a note in your CV even, to say that, well, you know, that these are publications that you have in your record, but they are not something you're kind of, you know, that you published in these suspicious journals without knowing it. I mean, you know, if it's, as long as it's not a machine reading your CV, I think, so that would be one approach. So being transparent, disclosing, even admitting that, well, you did it inadvertently. I think that might be an approach if you can't withdraw the paper from the journal or the website. So.
If you have not signed the copyright transfer form, then the paper can be withdrawn. A case recently came into my experience where some of the authors from my country had submitted a paper to a journal that was a predatory one. They are not familiar with the predatory journals at that time. So that paper was, editor did not respond to them for a couple of months. Then they presumably thought that the article was not right for the journal, and they're not responding. So they submitted to a legitimate journal, and the paper was published a few months later. And simultaneously, they found the article that was submitted to the predatory journal published online. So they contacted me, and I helped them to get it retracted from the website of the predatory journal, because they did not sign the copyright agreement form. So there are some occasions where you can get rid of the predatory journals and get your paper saved.
Okay, that's an interesting case. So did you say that they got it withdrawn from the predatory journal?
Yeah.
Okay.
The paper was withdrawn and taken off from the website. And COPE on its website also suggests few strategies that should be used by authors when they are dealing with the predatory journals.
Yes. Okay, that's a good point. So the Committee on Publication Ethics website, that's COPE, have some really good resources on this. And I think that I've heard about a case recently where this happened, so that it's worth checking out their websites, and there could be some options to get your article withdrawn from a predatory journal. Does anybody else hasn't had any experience of these types of journals?
Not really the predatory journals, but there's also predatory conferences as well, of course. And I was reading an interesting article recently where somebody had been sent an invitation to be a guest speaker at some conference in China or something like that. And she had replied saying, "What's the deal with this?" Hadn't agreed to speak. And the journal had so the conference people had immediately put her name up on the website as guest speaker. Professor so-and-so has agreed to speak at our conference. Everyone sign up, please. And she hadn't agreed to speak at all. And the conference organisers refused or didn't respond to her request to take the name down, so continued using it as marketing purposes. So yeah, as well as journals, predatory conferences are a problem too.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any opinions on these predatory conferences?
There was a question actually on the MOOC forums that I responded to about predatory conferences. My main point was that if you are not sure whether the conference is predatory or not, check who's organizing it. If it's organized by a learned society, it's likely genuine. If it's organized by a bunch of academics whose names you know and it's at a university or research institution, it's likely genuine as well. If it's very broad scoped, if it's in a luxurious hotel, only 2 days of meeting and 3 days of vacation, it's likely a predatory conference. So be careful.
Yeah, that's I think that's a good tip. Look to see who's running the journal, and are they a society or an institution, and are there speakers there that you trust and you know the names of? That's a good tip.
And one other tip as well, I suppose, would be with both conferences and journals is to ask a senior colleague or ask your supervisor, who will likely know the lie of the land and who's doing what in your sort of particular research area, and can advise accordingly.
Yeah, good tip. Okay, if there are no more opinions on predatory journals and conferences, we shall move on to another question.
Yeah, so our next question is on citations. How recent should the citations be in your paper?
Well, it's good to show that you're up to date with the current literature. And so it is always good to have recent citations. Ideally, citations to the most recent review papers, because from there people can trace back the literature if they want to. But many people, particularly also on the forums, seem to think that you need to stick to the last 5 years or the last 10 years. I think that is not the right way to approach this. I think you should go for citations that are relevant to the work, however young or old they might be. Because seminal papers, the papers that set up the field and that are still standing, could be 20, 30, or 100 years old. So you should go for papers that are relevant to your field and not necessarily just go for a time limit, but try to be as current as possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other opinions? Was that actually a really good, concise response?
Yeah, I agree with everything Richard just said then, so I have nothing to add.
Okay, how about a slightly different twist on this question? How many papers should I read for my literature review?
Maybe you should just start reading and keep reading until you see the same topics come back over and over again. By that time, you've read enough.
Yeah, sky is the limit.
Okay, so Good response. So we've probably got time for one more question, I think. Does anybody have any suggestions on other topics that have come up on the course so far?
I have something to say about a question that's been recurring. And I think it happened last year too when I was a first-time participant.
Okay.
And that's with the writing assignments. Perhaps we should, there should be a way of making it clearer that for the writing assignments, until you've done the second part, you do not get a tick on the box that you've completed, because perhaps there should be a way of making it more obvious to the participants when to expect a tick in the box that you completed a particular assignment.
Yeah, that question gets asked a lot in the technical forums for sure.
Yes.
Ravi, do you want to answer this?
Yeah, it's a little outside the scope of this discussion, but I guess, if we have in the assessment phase or even in the submission phase, there's something about what does a peer assessment activity consist of, the different phases. I have to check it again to see whether there is something about the tick mark when it comes. But the thing is that information is kind of very, text-based, and not a lot of people are reading it. So when we have 2,000 people in a course, even if 100 people don't read it, and they do get concerned when they submit their work, so that leads to a lot of questions from those 100 or so people. Yeah, it is something that we've. The bigger issue is that particular activity in Moodle is not very user-friendly, if you will. It's not something we can do a lot about. We can only give more and more instructions and information, and we are already given a lot of information on how it works. But it's ideally it should work in a way that it's more intuitive. So yeah, it is a recurring theme. But we look into whether we can change some of the instructions that we give for that activity.
May I suggest that maybe when you submit the first assignment, or when you click on downloading the first assignment, you get like an auto response, like you get an auto out of office response when you mail somebody to say that, remember, you do not get a green tick until you submitted the second part of the assignment. Then you get it again when you submit your assignment. Right. Then you get it again when you're submitting the one you've assessed. Perhaps that might help.
It might. It would help. It would definitely work. No, that is not easy because that involves coding and development work. So the platform that we use, Moodle, is really off the shelf. So those features, I agree, they would be really good to have, but we would have to actually code those features. None of the platform, we've not done any coding or development ourselves.
Okay.
So yeah, I think at some point, if Moodle itself comes up with those features, then we would have them in our courses, sort of the auto response. I agree that would be nice to have that, but I don't think we have the capacity to build those features ourselves.
Okay, maybe we'll capture this part of the video and put it into the technical forum.
Yeah,
that's the question. I thought it might be good to, as a final question, to look forward to some of the course content that's coming up. So perhaps we'll ask a question about journals.
Yeah. So what are the most important things to think about when choosing your target journal?
Just 5-word mnemonic. Go ahead.
Okay. So I was saying that the most important is to know your audience, and I'd like to support that with a recent article I read. I think it was an AuthorAID blog, where apparently there was an article that was published in, I think in the UK, that stated that Ebola was very likely to come up in Sierra Leone because of, I think, the movement of people. And apparently it was published in a journal that, well, not many people from Sierra Leone read. So it's important that when you're publishing, no matter how big the work is, the people who are going to read it, the people who are going to read it are also very important, because there's no point publishing something that is relevant to Africa in a journal that's mainly read by the Chinese. So the target audience is very important, one. then of course it's important that you aim for a journal that is readily accessible to many people, because you might publish in a local journal that doesn't have, that whose circulation is not very wide. So even if your impact is important to the world and you publish in a very small journal, then not as many people will have access to your article. So your target audience and then how wide the circulation of your journal is are very important when you're choosing your journal.
Yeah, I'd like to add something quickly. So there is a lesson coming up in the 5th week of the course on how to identify a target journal. And yeah, the target audience is really the key message. But I take one step back even and ask, so what are the journals that say you're reading? To the person who asks this question, which journals do you read? And that is a starting point often, because the journals you read the journals you like could be target journals for your work. So it's a good way to link the reading, the doing of the research, and the writing together.
And also the papers that you're reading, what journals are they published in? Again, they will probably be good target journals for your own work when it's finished and ready for submission.
Yeah, I have a just 5-word mnemonic for it. SALVR. Scope, audience, legitimacy, visibility. These are 5 things required for selecting a journal.
Cost might be one too.
Very concise.
Very important.
True. Any other thoughts on where you should where you think is the best place to publish your research?
Well, you may have to look at impact factor, even though it's not a terribly satisfactory metric. But if you are looking for a career in academia, certainly in the UK, there is a certain amount of pressure to publish in what you call high impact journals. And that's usually measured by impact factor. So in my work, I tend to try and get into Lancet journals because they're the top ones in my field. So yeah, even though it's academic game playing a little bit, but impact factor, I think it is something to consider if you want a long university career.
And that's not just in the UK, that's certainly also a problem in China. We try to get published in Nature and Science, and sometimes it works, most of the time it doesn't.
Same as here in Pakistan.
Eamon,
a lot.
Eamon, can you hear us?
Yes.
Are there any questions that you've seen in the discussion forums that you think need answering?
Not really questions, but I just wanted to underline some of the issues that have been raised, like in the proposal, in the budget. One of the most important things is that we really need to be realistic and not over ambitious. And again, it is important to understand the instructions given by the whoever posted the call. These are the main important issues that we can. We need to address. But again, on Predatory Journal, to me, the most important thing is to avoid to publish into the Predatory Journal, because once the paper is published, with the drawing, the paper becomes very difficult. In the references, yes, we need it to be. We have recent literatures to show that at least we have already the updates work that have been done. But I think, and this one maybe I can get comments from my fellows. Some of the references are classic. Some of these may be old, but they are classic. And is it bad to cite it?
Okay, so were you asking if it's appropriate to cite old research?
There are references that are classic, they contain information such as the formulas, maybe, and the person who derived that formula, he derived it or she derived it, a very, very long time ago. Is it right to cite it?
Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions that you think we should discuss before we go? Okay, so let's quickly ask that question. We can always, Amir just suggested another question, which we can record and include in some of the future lessons, which might be interesting. Let's see, just check what it was. So the question is, can I publish a journal article from my conference paper? Does anyone have any ideas?
I think it depends to the nature of the. If I understand it, is that maybe I attended the conference and then that paper was published in a conference proceeding, maybe, and now the question is whether is it allowed to publish it in a journal. I think it depends on the nature of the proceedings. There are proceedings that are edited, probably published. If the proceedings is published, I think to me it's not relevant to publish it in a journal. But some of the proceedings are not even widely circulated. Maybe they're just national, locally circulated. I think it is relevant to publish it in a journal. Maybe we can get views from others as well.
Okay, yes, so it can depend on the conference or the journal. Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Jahangir Hussain from Bangladesh.
Hi there, good to see you. You may be quite late for our discussion because we're just actually.
I was busy, that's why.
We're actually just about to wrap up. We're just on our last question, but it's good to see you.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yes.
Okay. Just are there any other responses to this question? Can I publish a journal article from my conference paper?
That came up a lot during in the discussion forum. I think it was Richard who answered one of the questions, and as he said, usually the conference proceedings, we usually just write a summary of your work, and sometimes what you present at the conference is like preliminary results. So yes, at the when you finish your work, you add more to it, make it a proper journal article, and there's nothing wrong with publishing as long as it forms a basis and it's not verbatim what was published in the conference proceeding. I think it's perfectly okay.
Great. Okay, if there are no other thoughts on that, Ravi, would you like to do your traditional summary of the discussion?
Yeah, I can do that. Nice. Yeah, I could do the summary. So I've made a note of the questions we went through. Let me try to keep this quick. So in the order of the questions, so the first question we looked at was how to get involved in research. So some suggestions that we had there was join an existing team, talking about your skills and interests with potential supervisors or mentors in plain English, really giving a sense of what do you have, where would you like to get involved, and also even before getting involved, I think I found this really interesting that to get a feel of research by talking or observing. Say if you can even be an observer in a laboratory, just get a feel before jumping into research, because sometimes research seems like a really nice thing, but you may want to just see how it's being done before getting involved. And especially when you're an undergrad, so the sooner you start even getting a feel, the better it is. Then we looked at who qualifies to be an author. So ICMJE came up as an example. So I know they give the authorship guidelines given by this organization, the International Committee for Medical Journal Editors, is very popular in the biomedical sciences. And they have, I think, 4 points. And you can look this up. It's online. It's been around for a very long time. So it's basically about substantial contributions to many aspects of the project, such as conceptualizing, doing research, data analysis, writing. But we had this may not always work in practice. It's really up to the research team. And the key thing is, I think, intellectual contribution. Now, how you want to define it is that's maybe up to your research team. And related to this, we spoke about whether supervisors who are purely supervising and not actually doing any research, should they be authors? I think there was some a bit of a debate about that. And I think the agreement was they do qualify to be authors, even though they don't do much research, because they are instrumental in making the research happen. So therefore they typically qualify. Of course, it's a different matter if there is someone who's not even involved. Should they be authors? That is a bigger question, and that's typically called something gift author, or so that should be avoided. So then we looked at a few questions on proposal writing, tips to write a proposal. We all agreed that reading the instructions is really important, and even if you have 1 or 2 extra words beyond the word count, your application could be rejected. This can happen in some cases when funders are really looking for reasons to reject proposals. So you've really got to aim for 100% compliance. And start with your main point. Get to the point early in your proposal. Don't leave it off for later. And revise your proposal many times. Let me discuss, can you apply for a research grant as an individual or a team without an institutional affiliation? And I think when it's a research grant, so I think that's what we discussed. For a research grant, you typically need an institutional affiliation because you have resources with the institution, you have opportunity to work with multidisciplinary teams. So here I'd like to add that small grants can be given to individuals, such as travel grants. These are maybe often given to individuals, but these are not research grants, just a grant for attending a conference. But typically when you want to do research, you're expected to have an institutional affiliation. And then we saw submitting a proposal to different funders. So not at the same time, that would be unethical. And also, there was an interesting question about whether one grant for another grant and to top it up. And Richard, with this, he mentioned that typically this is not a successful strategy because a funder knows that the chance of you succeeding depends on you getting the other grant. And I think there are even some, maybe difficult correspondence to engage in when you have to report to both funders. So that's usually not a good strategy to kind of get the amount from 2 or more funders. Plagiarism. So we looked a bit about that. So it's often a hot topic, and there's a lot of information in the course, of course, about plagiarism. So I think Zainab made a good point here about first to understand what plagiarism is. Both citation and paraphrasing are important. And try to run your text through a plagiarism checker. And then to Mboni, I think, mentioned that you've got to plan your paper, you need to have original contributions, And plagiarism is also the level of text and ideas. It's not just about reworking words and sentences. It's really about avoiding plagiarism at the level of ideas. And yeah, so that's the key thing. Accessing literature behind paywalls. So I think we came up with, there were some very good practical suggestions. There is a new plugin called Unpaywall, which is a Chrome plugin. I think it's really new. It's not even in the course material. So that's a useful tool to find, kind of unpaywall versions of any article. ResearchGate is a good source. Google Scholar shows you PDF versions of articles, writing to the corresponding author, even collaborating with people abroad in universities that have a lot of access to resources, and so they can help with the literature review phase. And then there is a repository angle where some universities require authors to upload accepted versions. So Michael mentioned that his university has that policy. So you may be able to search the institutional website, or there's a collection of repositories called Open DOAR, Directory of Institutional Repositories. So it's just, there were actually a lot of suggestions that came up. So really, I think today, this year, 2017, we are here. So there are a lot of ways where you can get access to literature behind paywalls in a legal way. So you can really explore all these options. We had a couple of questions about the predatory journals. So Amir has done some recent work in this area. I mentioned something about looking for warning signs, such as fake metrics, such as a global impact factor, or different kinds of impact factor, which are not really the authentic impact factor. Fake indexing services, and to look for journals that have a really broad scope. That is also a warning sign. The journal that publish in all fields of science or social sciences, and sometimes the duration from submission to publication is really short, and that's also a warning sign. So you've got to explore the website, and I would add that, are you a reader of that journal? So this is also linked to a later question, which I'll come to. So do you like to read the articles published in the journal's website? Because often the articles themselves are not very good. What if you have published in a predatory journal? And this can be, even if you have not signed over the copyright, so that if the journal refuses to withdraw your paper and you want to withdraw it, so that can be a problem. There is actually some information on the COPE website. I just looked it up. COPE is a committee on publication ethics. So they have some guidelines on how to withdraw an accepted manuscript from a predatory journal. So it's really specific advice, and it's related to what Amir mentioned. I think he had an anecdote about that. And even to be wary of predatory conferences. Who is organizing it? Is it a legitimate society? Or if there's an emphasis on location or venue with an image of a beach, so you've got to be wary about that. Some conferences try to lure authors with a location. So we went back to the literature review phase. Citations, how recent do they have to be? There's no hard rule. So you just got to be up to date with current literature. Richard mentioned some seminal papers could be even 100 years old. So, there's no rule. And how many papers to read? Again, there's no rule until you keep reading, and then you get a sense of what are the key topics or the hot topics, and you start to see links between what one paper you read and another. So that is a time when you can assume that, okay, you're kind of getting on top of the literature. So you've got to keep reading until you start seeing the links and the same topics as you read. How to choose a target journal. So we had a bit of a discussion here, and I think some of these are mentioned in the lesson that's coming up in the 5th week of the course. So I'll leave it for that. Basically, it's about the audience. Do you know the audience that you want to reach? And are you a reader of your target journal? So these are 2 questions to ask, I would say. And finally, the last question we looked at was, can you publish a paper from a journal paper from a conference paper? So yeah, a conference paper can definitely be a foundation for a journal paper. It's just republishing a conference paper as a journal paper is usually not the right thing to do because that journal paper is supposed to be new. But it can be a foundation if you have some original and new information, so you can base on your conference paper. These were most of the questions that we looked at. So Andy, over to you.
Okay, that was a really good summary of everything we talked about. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for coming in and for contributing your thoughts and ideas. There's some really good responses and so we're going to have another discussion later on in the course, and I look forward to